and welcome everybody. Welcome to another Thursday night edition of Aquaholics Anonymous. Of course, my wonderful buddy, pal, and co-host, Chattanooga Ed. Thank you for being here, my friend. And the crowd goes wild. Appreciate that very much. Tonight we are going to be discussing questions to ask before you buy a fish. So tonight I'm kind of going off of a list created by Aqueon on their website. And the way that came about is I'm always curious what the, I'll call it the mainstream media of the fish fam is putting out there in terms of guidelines and recommendations and things like that. So, you know, there are a lot of things that we recommend people to look into before just doing an impulse purchase in terms of new fish. And I wanted to see kind of how this mainstream list kind of measures up to what us as experienced fish keepers and people that are new to the hobby, hear and tell people, you know, on like YouTube and our buddies and pals and things of that nature. So we're going to go through that tonight, and then Ed has got an awesome show, and we will talk about the subject on that here in a little bit. But it's going to be another fun list to go through. I appreciate you all being here tonight with us. I do want to say a huge thank you to Rico Stan for that $5 super sticker before the party even got started. So thank you for that, Rico. I noticed you said you're going to be missing the stream tonight. Not a problem, buddy. And happy birthday to your daughter, I believe it is.
The Duchess Ariel.
The Duchess Ariel. All right. Well, happy birthday to the Duchess Ariel. And we've got Tank Top Tropics with the $2 super sticker with that. Wait for it. Thank you for that, Tank Top. Hope you're doing well today, my friend. Glad to see you all in here. It's been weird not doing the 2 streams a week, not doing that Saturday stream. Feels like I haven't talked to you all in a long time. Ed and I went and had some fun with Bob Kaler down in Georgia this past week. So that was a blast, and T and Aqua was with us. That was a lot of fun, and we'll talk a little bit about that stuff. I'm going to kind of go through this list first, and then we'll get into the questions and comments in the stream. So you may want to wait to put those at Fish Room Fevers in there, but when the time comes, if you've got a question, please put the at symbol and then Fish Room Fever. That will highlight it for me, and that shows up bright orange on my screen. That way it's easier for me to catch those. And then we've got some news about an upcoming event that we were going to go to, as well as kind of talking about our recent trip with Bob Kaler and T and Aqua. But before we get into that, let's go over, and again, this is Aqueon, and I will put a link down below to credit to them. We're going to be critiquing their list of questions to ask before you buy new pet fish. And I will go ahead and put that up on the screen as well. Now, I will say that just kind of glancing over their list, what I saw, I agreed with. But we will definitely put any of our observations in here if we disagree with anything we come upon, because you can get into some crazy stuff when you go through corporate lists or big business lists, things of that nature.
Could we go over real quick what exactly Aqueon is?
Like, yeah, absolutely.
Or, just who they are. Just so, because there might be people that they're trying to figure out what the letters mean.
So if you are unfamiliar with Aqueon, Ed here will tell you about their company.
No, you go for it. You're the man.
I mean, I don't know a history of Aqueon. I just know they're one of the prominent aquarium, manufacturers, as well as companies with, filters and various aquatic products. I couldn't give you a company history. I thought you were going to say back in whatever.
Well, now I wish I would have done the homework, because I would have loved to have done that. Darn it. But yeah, they're the main, probably they're the biggest staple for fish tanks, other than like them and Marineland are probably the 2 big glass box fish tanks that you find at our box stores. And even our local pet stores also use a lot of them. They're the most affordable out there because they make so many. But I wish I would have had the stats on them. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Typically speaking, and this may vary in different markets, but I know in markets in our area, if you're hitting $1 per gallon sale, it's an Aqueon tank that you're purchasing. And they're good tanks. I've got a lot of them, and I know most people in the hobby. I'm sure everybody in here has probably got at least one Aqueon tank or has had one at one point in time. All right, we've got that up on the screen. I'm going to grab my live chat here real quick.
Their black rims are about 1 inch, and the Marineland are 1/2 inch.
Yeah.
So when you put them side by side in your fish room, you can tell them apart. So just about everything in here is Aqueon because I got a few marine land and it drives me nuts to have that little rim.
Yeah, most definitely. I've got the same issue with a lot of my 10 gallons. When I put them on racks, I had to kind of separate and do all of the Aqueons together and all of the other together because of that rim size difference, and the tanks would sit a different height as well. And so it just kind of drove me nuts when I first just threw them all in there and didn't account for that. So let's go through this. Number one, how big will the fish get? I think that is a very important question to ask. I know you and I always tell people, you know, when you're researching the fish, find out how big that thing's going to be. Through no fault of their own, I would say, a lot of local fish stores carry bigger fish than most individuals should be keeping. And we'll talk about things like, you know, red-tailed cats, pacu or pacu or pacu, however you prefer to pronounce it.
Maybe Oscars even.
Even Oscars.
One of my things I do when I first go into a brand new pet store or fish store, I like to ask them, and I pick the biggest fish in there, and I say, "Will this be fine in this little 10-gallon tank?" And if they say yes, I know they're crooks. Right,
and that's where the big differentiation comes in my opinion, is you get fish stores that do carry those things, but try to get people not to purchase them unless they can adequately care for them. And then you have fish stores that will bring in red-tailed cats, you know, every shipment and just sell them out to anybody and everybody they can. Or, you know, I've seen occasions where the maximum size is listed as way below what they actually are. And that's always unfortunate. But definitely not just in monster fish or oddball fish, but in all fish, you should find out how big that fish is going to get. You want to know if that tetra is going to be, you know, a small tetra that's proper for your nano tank, or if you're going to end up with, you know, a school of 23-inch tetras in your 6-gallon tank. So absolutely, in doing your research. And again, we all have cell phones nowadays. So I've got stuff all over my phones too. Cell phones nowadays, the information is there. It's really easy to research fish before you buy them versus, you know, back in the day, if you will, where you kind of had to find somebody that knew about the fish, or, you know, go to a library or things of that nature. So always absolutely find out how big that fish is going to get. This I thought was an interesting one, and this is one that we don't often touch on a lot when we're discussing things to look into before doing an impulse purchase, and that is, what does the pet fish eat? I think that's a really good question. I think you know, there are definitely fish that require specialty diets, as most of us are aware of that have been in the hobby for a while. And a lot of people new to the hobby may not be familiar with. You know, you've got things like hill stream loaches that aren't necessarily as easy to take care of in terms of food requirements as, say, your common tetras and things of that nature. So I definitely agree with that. And I was kind of surprised that we don't talk about that more often, because I think that really is a good one.
Yeah, I've ran into it twice where I've had fish that I didn't think would eat plants devour my the soft plants. I don't know if it's kind of hard to explain, but like they may not eat the val, but they ate the pennywort like crazy.
Right.
You know, I've had that with barbs, and my American flagfish just devoured all the roots, like the val that isn't planted. Yep. It kind of goes on runners. They'll devour the roots because I guess the roots are softer than the leaves. Just weird.
I believe it's the Buenos Aires tetra that will pretty much eat any plant life except for Java ferns. And somebody will correct me, I'm sure, if that's not it, but I'm almost positive that's it. But definitely look into that fish's dietary requirements. I know Ed, you and myself and people like Bob and other, we'll say seasoned aquarists, when we're fish shopping, if we run into something we're not familiar with, or if we're buying from, you know, maybe at a swap, something like that, we always, hey, well, what are you feeding these guys? And I think that's definitely a good thing to look into. It would not be hard to go to a local fish store, pick something up, and then you get home and realize that you can't or are not meeting the dietary requirements with the fish food you currently have on hand.
And, you know, we could also take that one step farther. If you're planning on breeding them,
yep.
A lot of the fry take crazy little foods.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, probably a beginner is just going to be happy having fish. But
absolutely.
They might think, oh, it's going to be fun to have guppies, but then they see a neon tetras. Oh, I'd rather breed neon tetras. Definitely. Whole nother ballpark there.
Absolutely. So yeah, and then you get into, protein contents and the actual contents depending upon what you're doing for each fish. So definitely a good idea to look into that. 3 and 4, I very much like they've got these separated because they go together, but they don't. A lot of people would kind of overlap them. 3 being, is the fish species peaceful or aggressive? And 4 being, is it territorial? You can definitely note, you can have a fish, generally, if a fish is aggressive, it's going to be aggressive throughout the entirety of the tank to all the other inhabitants or specific inhabitants, regardless of the area of the tank that they're in. That's typically what I would define as aggression in fish. Territorial being that fish is not going to chase the other fish throughout the entirety of the tank, but it definitely requires its own separate area in the tank that it can inhabit, and it will fend fish off from there. It will fight fish out of that. Just one example might be your bristlenose plecos. They're not an aggressive fish by any means, in my opinion, anyway. But they definitely will be territorial when it comes to their cave. They definitely do not want other fish in their cave unless it's, a male inviting the opposite sex in to make some babies. But they definitely don't want other fish going in their cave. And even mystery snails. The funniest thing I think I've ever found is having mystery snails in male bristlenose plecos. Yeah, because the snails from time to time will wander into those caves, and it really upsets the males, and they do everything that they can to get those suckers out of there. I will say a huge thank you for the super chats, super stickers I saw come in. I will definitely get to those, and I appreciate you all very much. We're going to kind of burn through this list just for people that kind of want to catch the main meat of the subject, if you will, and then we can do our awesome Fishy Folk hangout after that, and I will address those. But I do see them, and I do appreciate you all.
I like how you said they don't like the suckers in there.
Yeah. No pun intended. Wait, hold on a second. I've got a button for that. I don't know if you could hear that or not.
Yeah, wow. Boy, you are just classing this place up.
We're working on it. We're trying to have a fun time, right? And that's one of the things. We'll talk more on that. Well, we'll have fishy fun talk here in a little bit. Let's get through this list. Let's try and help and educate some people and see how we feel about this list in general. So we got, is it territorial? Will it get along with my fish? Now that kind of plays into the other in terms of checking for peaceful or aggressive and territorial. But that's a very good question to ask. You definitely don't want to take, say, your discus tank and introduce a school of bucktooth tetras into it. That's a horrible idea, and I feel sorry for those poor discus. Not that I've seen anybody specifically do that, but I just thought that was a very good case. If you could see these guys, they go, oh, it's a tetra. And I've seen these other tetras in with discus before. I'm going to put these tetras in with these discus. Yeah, that's not a good idea. But definitely compatibility is key. And although it is encompassed with being territorial and, peaceful or aggressive, it is its own kind of little niche in that category, if you will, I feel like. But it's still definitely very good advice. I definitely agree with that.
Here's one of the biggest mistakes I ever did on territory. Okay, back in St. Louis, I had African cichlids in a 120, and I had tons of pots in there, and they just bred and had crazy fun. No fighting, just super fun.
Nice.
Well, I got a bunch of Mabunas, and I put them up. I got I think 15 or 16 at the big fish deal. They were just closing out, and they just kind of said everything in this tank for $30 or whatever.
Right.
Deal, and I shouldn't have because they're cichlids, not guppies. But you're in the mood. Everybody's talking cichlids, and so I'm like, okay, I can have one cichlid tank, and I put them in their quarantine tank. They were fine. It was a 20 long with nothing but a rock in the middle to hold. I don't know why I put it. I guess I just put a rock in the middle of just the tanks to put a rock in. But I just put a rock in there. And then I put them in, not their forever home, but their grow out home.
Right.
Well, because I was going to make a styrofoam wall with lots of caves in it was my goal. But in that short period that they were in the tank, I put a bunch of PVC because I was going to use PVC to make the tubes in their cave too.
Right.
It was just a slaughter fest. And I purposely put in 20 tubes so there'd be a couple extras, and they still fought for every tube until there was only one. And the last two were so tough. Actually, the last one died of wounds, I think, because the bladder wasn't swimming right, and he ended up dying too. So I actually have no Mabunas, not even one. It's crazy.
Yeah, I know you kind of kept me up to date with that as it kind of happened over a course of, a good bit of time, and it was a shame that did happen. Oh, there we go. Got that fixed.
But so territorial, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, definitely agree. And sometimes you come across these lists and they've got some crazy stuff on there, some outdated tips. But thus far, I feel like Aqueon has been on top of this, and I very much appreciate that, given that they are a big name in the industry. Does it need special water parameters or temperature? I know this is something that we talk about a lot of times. Make sure that, if you've got a tropical setup, that you get a tropical fish. If you don't want to put a cold water fish into a tropical setup, really. And we're speaking more in general terms and to new aquarists here, because I know we're going to have a lot of, or we might have a lot of people that chime in and say, well, I've kept this fish with that fish. And there are a lot of possibilities and outside of the box doable things that advanced aquarists can get away with. But this is more for the beginner entry level. This is somebody that doesn't know a whole lot about fish, I feel like. Somebody new to the hobby. This is to help them be successful. And so that's what I'm looking at, is from that perspective, is this list legitimately useful to somebody to help them be successful and stay in the hobby? Because we have such a high turnover rate, unfortunately, of new people get into the hobby. They have an issue that could have generally easily been avoided, and then they just leave the hobby. And I know we always enjoy, free tank or cheap tank because somebody got out of the hobby, but we don't really take into account, I think, a lot of times, and think about the fact that we've just lost a fellow hobbyist over something that was probably avoidable. So absolutely. Another thing that plays into that, aside from temperatures, a brackish, does it have a salinity requirement? That's a big thing. You're seeing a lot more, at least I'm seeing a lot more brackish fish than I did, several years ago. So I think that that's awesome, but I also think that people need to be aware of that. And I think that it's wonderful when I see, like, my local fish store, Aquatic Marine, they do a great job of taking, brightly colored markers and pens and writing on the glass and making sure you're aware that this is a brackish fish, that this does not need to go straight into your freshwater setup. I'm sorry, I've got a wild hair in my mustache that's tickling my nose. It looks like I've been picking my nose the whole time because I keep trying to get it to lay down there. Sorry about that, folks. I 100% agree. Also, you've got things like, your pHs and stuff of that nature, which we can generally get fish acclimated to. But there are, of course, exceptions to the rule. I'm speaking in general here. But typically, I find if you're buying a fish locally, for the most part, bearing in mind that my LFS 3 minutes away has a different water source than I do, but fish you find locally tend to do decently in your water. Even more so if you're getting them for fellow hobbyists. But always something just to be aware of. What kind of water is this fish coming from? The zebra plecos, those guys require, that's one that I actually pay more attention to in terms of their pH versus some things that maybe a slightly pH is recommended, but that fish has gotten used to having the standard pH from, my tanks in my area. How many fish should I buy? I love this question, especially because we talk about Cory cats a lot, on the streams here. That's a fish I find that we're often getting asked about, or people ask recommendations. And people don't always take into consideration how many fish that fish would like to have with it. So, like, we talk Cory cats and we say, hey, minimum group of 6 recommended. So I think that's a wonderful question. Is this a fish that should be by itself? Is this a fish that is going to do better, with just a mate in there? Is it a fish that's going to do better with 6 or 12 or, however you want to get into? I think that's a great thing that we should all stop and look at when we purchase fish. I'm also of the mindset that if I go to buy Cory cats, I'm going to buy 6. If they have a 7th one in the tank, I'm just going to buy the 7th one, so I'm not leaving that one alone. That's a step further than I would expect most people to go, I guess. But it's just one of those things for me, is I hate to leave that little guy by himself and take the rest of the group home. So just a side note, personal thought there. What about you, Ed?
Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I was gonna respond to something that Crown Tail Half Moon asked about guppies. I'm sorry.
I got you. No, you're fine, buddy. All right. I just want to give you a chance before I moved on to the next question. How long do pet fish live? I think, again, definitely something you should be looking into. You need to know, am I getting into the time investment of 3 years, 5 years? Is this going to be a fish that's going to be around when my newborn is heading off to college? And people don't really think of fish in that sense or from that perspective. But, we've got fish in the hobby we see fairly frequently that can live 20 years. So that's definitely something to take into consideration. And I feel like we don't do it with fish as much as we would another animal. Dogs, cats, birds, things of that nature. And maybe not even so much with birds, because a lot of people don't realize just how long-lived birds are a lot of times. But I think that people take life expectancy into consideration with dogs and cats a lot more than they do fish, because fish, unfortunately, are often seen as a throwaway pet. So that's definitely something to look at and go, hey, is this fish going to live for the next 15, 20 years? And am I going to keep it for that long? If not, do I really need to be getting this fish? Do I, planning an exit strategy for, 10 years down the road if I'm not going to be keeping it that long? Things of that nature. Versus, I got this fish. I didn't look at the size. I didn't realize it was going to live 20 years. And now the fish is this big, and I'm going to haul it up to Ohio Fish Rescue, where they're already, they've got their hands full as it is, and I'm going to put more burden on them. So definitely keep that in mind and kind of look into it and plan accordingly. If it's something that you don't want to house it and it's just, that's cool, but I kind of, I don't know that I really want to have this thing for 20 years. I just thought it looked neat, and maybe for 6 months I'd keep it. Really put some thought into whether or not you buy that fish versus, I've got datnoids. They're this big. I know they're going to get massive. I know that it's, 15 plus years, and it takes a long time for them to get that big, and that's a long-lived fish. And I intend to have that fish and to adequately home that fish as it grows and keep it through its life expectancy, and hopefully, have it for a very long time. That's always, my goal. That also gives you more bang for your buck, right? If you spent, 50, 80 to $100 on this fish and you get 20 years out of it versus, yeah, absolutely. So there you go. You could get some more value out of a fish
Also,
that way.
On the flip side, it might be good to know what you're getting in short life expectancy. Yep. Because
Absolutely.
like when you're getting killies or something that has a very, they only live for a year, like flowers in your garden, know what I definitely investigate their life's expectancy. That's a great one, I think.
And like you mentioned on the flip side of that, guppies is one we talk about a lot. If you're getting a full-grown adult guppy, you really don't know how old it is. I mean, you might be able to, if you got it specifically from a breeder, find out. But most breeders sell juveniles; they don't sell adults because guppies are not really a long-lived fish. So unfortunately, you do see from time to time people will purchase, hey, I bought this fish tank and it was already set up with these guppies. And then 3 months later, they started dying off. Well, the chances are, if everything tested fine and there was no disease, they probably just had come to the end of their life cycle. Especially because you see a lot of times where you'll have siblings. So those guppies are all about the same age. So they start dying off around the same time. If people are going, my fish are dying and I can't figure out why. My parameters are good. There's no disease. I've checked everything. I'm testing my water every day. What's going on here? And it's like, well, they're probably from that same batch of fish. And they're not a long-lived fish. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's weird because most of the fish that you get at the pet store or the fish store are juveniles. It's small versions of whatever you're going to get, except for when it comes to mainly guppies, shrimp. I know jellyfish because we were looking at getting a jellyfish tank here in the family, and we decided not to because we had no idea how old a jellyfish lived in their 3 year. Well, we know that they live for 3 years, but they pull them right out of the ocean full size. So we decided not to do jellyfish. But it is strange how some fish, they sell full size and some, or the majority, it seems like they're little to fit into tanks.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I think it's a lot easier to catch, a freshly hatched batch of red-tailed cats and kind of net a whole bunch of babies up, aside from the selling points, obviously. But I feel that kind of carries over to all juvenile fish. It's a lot easier to kind of net an entire brood or recently hatched batch of fish or juveniles that are still in the same area versus trying to go out and catch a lot of adults. Or even sub-adults. But yeah, absolutely. A lot of fish you see are a lot smaller. Am I frozen on your screen? I'm frozen on my screen.
Yeah, you've been frozen.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's lovely. Well, hopefully you all can still hear me.
At least you look cool because you're doing this.
Yeah, all right. Hey, there we go. I
It.
did the exact same pose and it stopped, so that was kind of funny. I tried to mimic what was on screen and I picked back up again. So there we go.
Picture identification things to see if you were a bot or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, it was. I was moving too fast for the camera. I think that's a very valid point. Let's see. How long has the fish been in the store? This is something that I know I've heard you ask, and I asked myself a lot. When did this guy come in, or when did you get these in? You typically
never last.
Yeah, you typically want to avoid fish that have just come into the store. Those fish, they're stressed out from travel. Oftentimes, they've had multiple journeys in a very short period. So they may have been, caught in Southern or Central America, and then they go to one place and they get exported, and then they land here, and then they go to another place, and then they finally make it to your local fish store. So they may have not even eaten for, a week. Plus, they've been on the road, getting bounced around, thrown around. They're really stressed out. Their immune system is not at its peak, and they're oftentimes more prone to get diseases. So I definitely recommend finding out, well, when did these fish come in? And there are a lot of times that, I've seen fish come in, and I'll tell my local fish store, well, if they're still around, in a couple days or next week, I'll come back and see how they're looking. Another thing that you see a lot, aside from the fact that they're not getting, of course, fed in transit, is that a lot of wild caught fish are malnourished in the wild. And I do the quotes because they're malnourished in terms of how we keep our fish fed. But that's kind of the general standard of living for them in the wild. So they come in and they don't look as fat, I guess is the best way to put it, without getting into details. So that gives them a chance to kind of settle in, get over the stress of shipping, which, we know from some research that those stress hormones, can still show like 28 days later after a fish has been caught in the fish's body. So a couple of days doesn't clear that, but it definitely gives them a chance to settle in. The local fish store could get to start feeding them and getting them some food, and kind of transitioning them over. And it just kind of, it makes it better all around. If it's just not a recently brought in fish. There is, of course, the FOMO, the fear of missing out. Oh no, what if it's not here next week? Or the instances of I'm just passing through and I'm not going to be here again. I can understand those situations, specifically I'm not coming back through here. If Ed and I see a fish in Atlanta and it just came in, the day before, we're not going to be back that way the next day or probably not the next week. Who knows? It's us. We might be, right? You never know with us. But so I could understand that. But get into that situation knowing that you're getting a fish that's more susceptible to catching diseases because it's got a lower immune system.
Yeah, get a quarantine tank.
Yep,
because
absolutely.
The cool stuff never lasts.
Yep.
Rob at Aquatic Aesthetics, he got some awesome auto cats. And I mean, these guys, they're like, I don't know if they're orange stripe, like bar. They were just so cool looking. He showed me a photo of one, but he said they didn't last at all. So it's sometimes it's worth just doing having your backup tank to watch.
Absolutely. Most definitely.
But James and I we went to Atlanta. We went to one fish store, and it was a box store. Most of all the stores we went to were all like independent shops, but we went to one box store because generally it's a pretty good box store. And they had a whole wall. Well, it was not a wall, but it was like all the tanks along the middle section was inked up. I kept wanting to say inked up. Inked up. And we were trying to tell the girl how to cure them and at least pull the really sick ones out, and they just didn't want to hear any of it.
Yeah. It happens. It happens. All right, number 10. What part of the aquarium will it occupy? This is great, not just information to know, but also in terms of stocking your tank. You don't want to end up with everything on the bottom or everything on top. It's nice to know, is this going to be a top dwelling fish? Is this going to be kind of a center of the water column? Is it a bottom dweller? And that allows you to get really creative with your stocking. You can kind of go through and plan and go, okay, I've got, these for bottom level. And, case in point, Corys. If you're looking for top water action, corridors are not your fish. They're primarily bottom dwellers. So it's really good information to have. You go, okay, well, I want these guys for the bottom area. I know I had the space in that area. So I'm not going to be putting in, 10 corridors and 4 plecos and, these other bottom dwelling fish and kind of cram up all the space so that they don't have adequate room. And then I also don't have anything else going on in the tank. So not sponsored by Pepsi, but it's cherry Pepsi's okay. It's good stuff.
It is.
It is. Yeah.
Well, I want to get rid of it because it's so empty.
Right.
The caffeine.
I just the way you did the label, I was like, oh, I don't know. Product placement.
Well, I've been when people talk and I realize I have their sticker, I try to show it real quick.
Right.
And well, look, it's Pepsi is in the house. No, it's not in the house. I'm on a whole lot of sinus medicine, so I need caffeine.
Absolutely. And 11, the last on their list here. This is one of my favorites. What type of habitat does it need?
Ooh, good one.
I go into this one a lot in terms of piranha because you hear people talk about they're horrible fish. I hated them. They just hit all the time. They didn't. Most oftentimes, and I'm not attacking anyone here. I know we've had some people that watch this frequently and have either had piranha, have piranha,
Listen,
so on.
He's been attacked by the piranha.
I have. I've bred many red-bellied piranhas. I've done a lot with piranhas. Okay, pretty much everything but eaten piranha. But a lot of times they're not set up with the habitat that fish finds comfortable. And people, I feel, would get a lot more enjoyment out of those fish, if they bought them for the right reason, because a lot of people just buy them because they want to throw stuff in there to watch it eat it. And B, if they set up the habitat as an actual habitat. And I'm not saying you've got to go full on biotope, because realistically, if you want to get technical, most of us are never going to have a legitimate true biotope. But definitely think of the environment they're coming from and set them up an actual habitat that mimics what they would enjoy. I try, again, specifically to the piranhas with their habitats. They've got some open water area. They've got some fast flow area they can get into, but they also have some spaces that they're semi-hidden and some spaces that they can be completely hidden. And unlike a lot of people who may just have an empty tank with a heater and, a pot in there. I've seen that before. And I'm not referencing anybody specifically. I just am picturing that. And they say, well, it tries to hide, all the time. Well, yeah, I mean, it's not comfortable. So it's trying to hide where it can. It's sticking itself behind that pot, or it's even trying to wedge itself behind a heater or behind the box filter that's hanging on there. Whereas if you make them feel comfortable, you see them more often. And that's true with a lot of fish, not just piranhas. But that's one very specifically that I see the habitat issue with a lot and have a lot of personal experience with. So that's the one I talk to.
Yeah, well, and James did an amazing job with his. His piranha are actually fun to watch. And it's not because he's throwing steaks in there. They kind of rest under a log, some of them, but then he has an open area, feeding area, where they're just always just kind of going in circles and checking each other out, and they're not attacking each other. They're just looking cool, and you've done a great job with that, James. You really should do a video on how to set that up.
I appreciate it. I plan to do that when I get them in the new tank. And we can kind of talk about all the craziness that's happened here in a minute now that we've gotten through that list. So overall, I would give them a 10 out of 10 on this list. I think it touched a lot of very key points that you and I both speak on, as well as a couple things that we maybe don't bring up enough. It didn't have any misinformation in those questions, or it didn't have any selling points. That's one of the things I look for when I see something from a major brand is, are they just trying to sell me something else? So
I would have added a 12.
Right.
If this is for beginners. They need to say responsibility.
Yeah.
They needed to say something about water changes and filtration, I think.
I don't disagree with you. I think that you could maybe classify that under parameters and water chemistry and things of that nature. Because they do talk, temperature, alkalinity, specific pH, things of that nature. But I don't disagree with you. It's not plainly out there in that list, and I didn't want to read through all their specifics on those questions. But I think they did a very good job. And then again, that's Aqueon's 11 questions to ask before you buy new fish for your aquarium. I think they did a very good job. Kudos to them. High five from the Fish Room Fever Fish fam on that one. All right, let me get into the chat here. I'm sorry. I know that you all have been waiting for me to get to this, but I really wanted to go through that meat and potatoes part of the show. First off, a huge thank you and congratulations to those of you all with that awesome 1-year membership badge. We just hit the 1-year mark on when we opened up members. The Zen Ginger and a couple others, I think Bob Kaler, have that.
Or Gina French.
Yeah, Gina French. I think Tiffany White as well. But a huge thank you to you all for your long-term support, and congratulations on that. I know people that were super happy to finally get that 1-year badge, because I'm the same way with other channels that I'm a member to. I'm like, I finally got the 12-month badge. So
I've got to be 2 days off.
I think you were very, very close. Very, very close.
I thought I got it as soon as I discovered that I could get it.
All right. Let me go through here and say some thank yous to the super chats and answer any questions in there, as well as the super stickers. Sorry, it's been a weird technical difficulties night. I had no camera and no mic 5 minutes before the stream was supposed to go live because I'd had my laptop unplugged from everything in another room, plugged it all back in, and nothing wanted to work. And I'm like, can you hear me? Can you see me? What are we going to do?
It's true. I was like, I get a little nervous. Well, we could have you speak on the speakerphone as I talk.
Absolutely. So we had Chad Krotz. How is it going, Chad? I hope you're doing well. With $20 super chat, says we need a don't panic super sticker. Don't forget where your towel is. Yeah, absolutely. Always trying to keep an aquarium towel handy. Thank you very much for that, Chad. Hopefully you're not having some sort of crazy issue with water everywhere needing a towel. I know I had one the other day. I got sidetracked trying to do one too many aquarium things and ended up with a lot of water in the floor. But thank you very much for that, Chad Krotz. Very much appreciated. And the crowd goes wild. I wish my camera would stop doing that. That's I'm sorry, folks. I'm glad it's at least working. But it's definitely just time to get the new computer. This is just giving way too many issues. And I apologize for that. Mike's Aquatics and Things with the $5 super sticker with the Hiya Fox. Thank you very much for that, Mike. I appreciate you. I hope you're doing well, Mike. And it's always a pleasure to see you. We've got 2 new members here. Welcome to the Fish Room Fever family. Mr. Manifesto became a member. Thank you very, very much for that. Jordan and the team Bristlenose, appreciate you.
This time next year, you will have a blue badge.
You will. And the people that just got their blue badge will have a special secret badge that has not yet been revealed for the 2-year badge. And we had Hillbilly Aquatics coming in at the snowball level. Welcome to the Fish Room Fever family. Thank you very much for that, Hillbilly. Okay, it did pop out of there. It just flew at the speed of light. So
I
thank you
want
very
to
much
buy
for
a banjo and try to learn how to play it.
You know, I was looking at a ukulele in Atlanta, and I was like, no, I don't need to do that. I don't. We'll stick to the.
If you started it, we could have our own Tennessee jazz band.
Oh,
Or not jazz
baby.
band, but mafia band.
I'm not making any promises that I'm talented enough to be in it, though. We'll put it that way.
Well,
all right.
Yeah.
So we've only got about 18 minutes left, so I'm going to dive into the chat, grabbing the highlighted stuff as I go through here. I'm sure it has jumped on me. So as far up as I can get is... All right, not too bad. I could get mostly back up to the top. Yeah, I could get back up to the top, it looks like. Fantastic. 105 people watching, 60 thumbs up. So thank you very, very much for that. I appreciate you all hanging out with us tonight for a Thursday night edition of Aquaholics Anonymous. Rolling into scrolling. We got Paul Stero saying hey to myself, Ed, and the rest of the family. It's party time. Indeed, indeed it is. Susan for SLC Aquatics. Hey, Fish Fam Mom, saying a hello in the chat. Roll on through here. Mr. Manifesto saying howdy earlier. Howdy. And again, welcome. Thank you for becoming a member. The new computer is a must. I was trying to do something for members only, and it's not doable with the current setup. YouTube, the members only stuff is still in its infancy, I guess you will. It's in beta mode. That always screws me up now that I'm into fish. Beta mode. So there are some things you can't do for members only. You have to set them up like either I have to do this from a laptop if I'm going to do members only, things of that nature. And it's like certain streaming software doesn't work with certain ways you have to set things up. So that being said, I need to get more technologically advanced so that I can do the things I want to do for the members, because I can't do them now with what I've got. But there is an update. I'm going to do a brief video tomorrow. I'm going to do a feeding of some new things that we got from Atlanta. And I think you all will enjoy that. But I really want to get Ed on the show with me for a members only live. And at this point, it's really hard to do from a technical standpoint between my setup and Ed's awesome tech knowledge. Right.
Well, I can show up somewhere.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right. Patrick Hardy, hello. Good to see you. Bottom Dweller Aquatics, what is going on? Another awesome member there. Appreciate you being here, saying hi to myself and Ed, and of course, everybody else. Now, again, if you do have any questions, feel free to put those in now. At Fishroom Fever will highlight for me. I'll grab those. We'll be happy to address those. Go ahead, Ed.
Speaking of my failures of technology, I was supposed to pay for our 2 tables for the Chattanooga fish swap for this Saturday, which is my cats must be pulling on
tables. Tables? What table?
I was going to get 2 tables for people to sell things at the swap.
Okay.
For any fish tubers. I think I asked you, but you said you weren't interested in selling. You're just there to have fun. But
probably.
Still,
I don't remember, but probably.
I was going to have like 10 bags of guppies and some plants and stuff. But I know Tiffany White's going to bring stuff. John Cox is going to bring stuff. Bob's going to. And so we were going to go with 1 table. Then Bob wanted to get 2. And it's like, yeah, let's do it. They're only $10 each. What a deal. So, I mean, I'm willing to give $20 to our local club.
Right.
But I was at the shop yesterday and they said, you aren't on the list for having the table. And I'm like, what? And I went to the PayPal, site where they said, click it. Somehow I paid myself $20. I clicked their thing, but somehow I did it and it said, you have sent $20 to Chattanooga Ed. And I didn't even realize it till afterwards. But I took pictures of every step as I was doing it, just in case. And yeah, Bob was like, oh, I think that's where you messed up. So just not very tech savvy, guys. Sorry. And now I wonder where my $20 is. How do I get my $20?
You got to send it back to yourself.
Ah, jeepers.
Stick your hand out. You went blurry all of a sudden. It's not auto-focusing back on you. I know I'm no one to talk with my mind freezing up, but You had it back. Yeah, you're good. You're good. Mine's probably nope. I see bubbles. I'm not frozen at the moment. All right, let's roll through here. Thank you to everyone. There's Gina French with that blue membership badge. Letting me know the camera's frozen. Thank you to everybody for making me aware of that. Crotel Halfmoon says, "What's your method for cycling new tanks before adding new fishes?" So this is not helpful for new aquarists that have no other tanks because I always keep additional sponge filters running in my tanks so that if I need to set up an additional quarantine tank or I'm setting up a new tank, I can go and pull those extra sponge filters and transition them over, and that will help get the cycling process going. Cycling in and of itself is an hour-long rant for me a lot of times because no two tanks are cycled the same. I mean, your bioload is just going to be different. So I can pull a sponge from a tank that's got a dozen neon tetras and move it to another tank, but that filter is not going to be cycled for, 2 Oscars. The bioload created by 2 Oscars, probably. Feeding levels, how much other surface area you have that beneficial bacteria is growing on, because beneficial bacteria only grows to a certain extent, and once it reaches that peak, that's where it tops off at because it can't be sustained at a higher level than that. But without going into that rant and off on that tangent, that is typically my method. Is I will pull a sponge filter from another tank, and I know that that's got me a good, I guess what I would refer to as a base cycle going, that I can either grow additional beneficial bacteria for a higher bioload, or I've even taken sponge filters out before because I knew that I was about to drop the bioload, and in dropping the bioload significantly, I would have a lot of bacteria dying off because there was no longer the required food source, which can create ammonia spikes. Then it starts the process of, bacteria die off, and then they kind of bloom out and eat off of that dying off bacteria as it goes through the process, and then they die back down again, and it's a back and forth bouncing ammonia spike disaster. So I've just pulled sponges before and dropped the bacteria level because of a large decrease in the bioload.
Yep. Fritz sells an instant cycle, and it's not truly instant. It still takes 24 hours. But I think it's a bottle. I don't remember what it costs. If it's $9, $9.99, $7.99, I don't know what it is. But I bought it a couple times, and I've used it, and it's totally worked. I actually have one in my refrigerator just in case, even though I have all the sponges all over the place that I could. Normally, I'm doing like a seed method. I think you'd kind of like take the filter and seed, like add it, the bacteria. Yep. You can also take rocks and things. Or wood is great because wood has lots of it. But the Fritz works really well. I haven't heard wonderful things about not API. Yeah, API has an instant one, but it's not refrigerated, and it just sits on the shelves for years. I don't know how good bacteria is going to grow in that. So if you're going to do a chemical way, I would just do Fritz because that's the only one that I know really works well. How about the old-fashioned way, and you buy 2 little fish and put it in there?
I mean, you could cycle it that way, but since specifically said before adding new fish, I wasn't going with that method. But yeah, absolutely, you could do that. And I do want to point out, hashtag not sponsored, but you can get the Fritz Zyme 7 live nitrifying bacteria on Aquarium Co-op, or if you're going to go with my method, you can buy the Aquarium Co-op sponge filters. I recommend the medium size, and you can just have those sitting in tanks so that you can simply transition those over to a new tank and be able to instant cycle, again, without going down that rabbit hole. But those would be my recommendations right there. Aaron San Mattel, thank you for the heads up on the camera. Good to see you. Freaky Fish Lady, another member, let me know I am frozen. Thank you very much for that. Rolling and scrolling, let's get down into some questions here. I know we had some.
John Cox asked if we have tables. Yes, we do have tables. Bob rented it or got the tables today, and it's rescheduled for May 8th.
Yes, they rescheduled due to weather, but we will be there. Paul Stero, very good tip here, says clear totes with lids and 5-gallon pails work well as temporary holding / quarantine tanks. Absolutely right, Paul. They definitely do. I think Corey, I know there are several people, but Corey or Bob Steenfott, maybe both, have videos about the plastic tote quarantine tanks and a really good way to set those up. Um, Definitely recommend you have a couple of those on hand if you're not going to actually have a true glass box aquarium for quarantine.
Racket Pond Life has one for the 5-gallon bucket too.
Yeah, the 5-gallon bucket's absolutely the Aquarium Pond Life.
I use the aquarium quite a bit for recover or for sick fish. I don't use it necessarily as my quarantine tank, but if I've got a fish that's been pounded really bad by another fish, right, I put them in a 5-gallon bucket because I know exactly that what I'm putting in. So I know how much salt to add or whatever. Normally I add salt to wounds. That sounds terrible. I add salt to wounds. But if a fish has wounds, I give it salt.
Definitely. Let's see. So Fishy Mom wants to know, how can I clear cloudy? I'm assuming water. It's going to be dependent upon the source. Is it a bacteria bloom or is it cloudy due to particulate? Some of the best ways to clear cloudy water due to particulate is actually going to be using a filter sock, which they're a lot more utilized in the saltwater side of the hobby. I still recommend you get one anyways. Even if you don't have a sump, it's real easy to rig those up to use for some polishing. Of course, one of my favorites is the do-it-yourself box filter, and then I put the polyfill in there, and that's great for polishing. But I have even taken the filter sock, and of course I don't have one that's not in a tank. No, I don't. So you could take a filter sock, a power head, and a hose, and basically clip that filter sock in the tank, and then take your power head and have the hose loop into it so that it's still pushing it through there, and that will help pull that particulate out. Just keep in mind that eventually the membrane will get full, and you don't want it where it's going to overflow when you clip that thing on.
I've actually done that.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites besides the polyfill.
I've got one of the Marineland polishers, which is great for large tanks because it actually goes in the aquarium. And I don't know what it was. I think it was $45 or something. And it really works because basically it just has a water filter and it's sucking water through and just polishing it. I'll also use hang off the backs. And that's when I use the cartridge that it comes with free. I don't hot rod it. I stick the cartridge in because it's basically just going to catch all the crud floating.
Absolutely. And Merdula there with a very valid point for Fishy Mom there says if the water is whitish cloudy, let it sit. It will settle on its own. Bacterial bloom, absolutely. If it's green, you've got green water. Chunky looking, you've got particulates. Yeah, very good points. Very, very good points. And thank you, Merdula. I don't know why Google keeps deleting your other comments, but Google is beating up on Merdula hard tonight for some reason. Sarah J. Sieber, how are you? Says Fisher Fever and Ed, what is the name of the filter floss looking stuff that removes ammonia? I can cut it into little pieces and put in bags when shipping fish. So that is the one specific name brand, because you can get just individual pads by a lot of different companies. And like there's one specifically for ammonia removal. There's one specifically for nitrate removal. You can get carbon in pads. Those there are a lot of different brands for. I think it's Polysorb is the one that a lot of people use. Let me look that up real quick. I've got some in a drawer, but I'm not going to go pull it out. Oh, not Polysorbate. Quit trying to tell me what I want to look for, Google. Somebody's probably already put it in the chat. Yeah, I oftentimes just use the ammonia pad versus that all-in-one, if you will.
I would use just the ammonia pad also.
Yeah, I mean that's
your big problem.
Yeah, I would get one of those because you could get a massive sheet of that stuff that you can cut into little squares for shipping, like you're talking about, for the same price, typically, if not less, than you get that one little package.
And
I don't think of the name of
fast your fish for a couple days, a day or two, before you do it, so that way they don't They're not filled with stuff that's going to mess up the tank or the water to begin with.
All right, I'm going to go look in the drawer because it's going to be easier than finding it.
Okay, well, while he does that, we were talking about Pam. I got a card from Pam, and we were arguing over this, my family. I was saying it was an elk, and I forgot what my mom was saying it was. Gosh, a caribou. And maybe caribou and an elk are the same thing. But my dad used to hunt caribou, so okay. Rob's saying elk. What's Pam say? Elk butt. Yeah, it's got the butt. Well, so Pam gave me this awesome card, and then I got the super awesome card that Patreons all get from her. Super beautiful. I love this little guy, and I'm not going to guess what he is. And it's all that handmade paper. It just looks so cool. I love it. So, Pam, you're awesome.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I was talking about things I got in the mail.
Oh, you're good, buddy. You're good. So we've got about 2 minutes left. I'm going to grab these super chats as we go through. We had our buddy T-Bones Fishies with the $3 super sticker with the thumbs up fist bump pair. Thank you very much for that, T-Bone. Appreciate you, my friend. Wrote one down through here. Drinkwater says, I've had 2 fish die in 2 days. When they died, they didn't float. What are the odds that it was a swim bladder problem? I mean, theoretically, it could be, but without really any other information other than they died, it's kind of hard to know.
Were they having a hard time swimming?
Yeah, and so that's the thing is we don't really have a lot of info.
It's like they'll roll sometimes and stuff.
Yeah, if you didn't really see swimming issues, it probably wasn't a swim bladder issue. Generally, that presents itself well before it actually kills them. And you notice that they're swimming funny.
Sometimes they'll do headstands. Sometimes they'll do the opposite. Sometimes they're rolling or just like a boat that's about to sink. They do all sorts of weird stuff when it's a swim bladder.
There it is. There's the Daniken Aquatics. What is going on? Kenny E from Daniken Aquatics with $5 super chat says, what up, brothers? What's going on, my brother? Appreciate the super chat. Of course, always good to see you, my friend. Kenny's not going to be happy with that one. It didn't even make it to the monitor. There we go.
That one went way over it.
All right. So I've got a question right here in front of me, and I know we've probably missed a couple of things. I would encourage you to bring those over to Chattanooga Ed's channel because we're about to wrap things up and head over there. But Mary Beth McCubbins, another awesome member, and thank you, by the way, for that, says, quick question. I got a heck of a deal on 2 used FX4 filters. It looks like they've been sitting empty. Should I do anything to them before I use them? So one thing I would do is do a leak check to make sure the seals are good. That's a big thing. Test to make sure those seals are good. I would probably get some lubricant on those seals. Open them up, take a look at everything. Typically, what I will do is get a 5-gallon bucket of just fresh water, leave it chlorinated, and kind of run it through there. Put the intake and the outlet into that bucket and run that chlorinated water through just to make sure you're going to clear out the funky stuff. There's nothing jammed up that you're not finding. It's also going to let you test the seals on there to make sure that when you hook it up to your tank, you're not going to have water spray everywhere because you've got a leaky seal. And then you could use Vaseline or many other things and just kind of.
Nothing with perfume.
Yeah, nothing with perfume. Just put a light coating on that seal. That way it's going to help it last longer. And hopefully they haven't kind of dried onto that. That's another thing you kind of want to look for is if they've been sitting empty for a long time. A lot of times those seals will dry out and they'll kind of turn sticky and adhere themselves to the actual filter. And then you may want to change them. If you have to use them right now, definitely I would look at ordering a couple replacement seals. But the seal is going to be the biggest thing that I'm going to look at. And then I'm just going to run some clean water through it. Probably for about 20 or 30 minutes just to make sure that I clear everything out, that it's functioning properly. I'm not going to have any issues out of it.
I might scrub it with a little bit of vinegar too, with just the empty shell. You can put some vinegar in there and just scrub it out with a little scrubber.
Absolutely.
Chris from Multi-Tank Addiction said that you missed his fertilizer.
This is fertilizer. I saw one from Chris. I haven't hit the final list.
Oh, I'm
Give
sorry.
me just a second. No, you're good. You're good. I know my chat bounced, and I had T-Bone, and then I saw Danikin, and I didn't know if Danikin's was first, so I grabbed Danikin's while I was there. But right in between the two of them was our brother from another mother, Chris, at Multi-Tank Addiction, dropping that pile of fertilizer on us. Chris, I appreciate you, my brother, my friend. I hope you are having a wonderful night. Danikin just put his 5 piles of poo in the chat, but thank you for that proud pile of fertilizer, keeping the plants healthy. Chris at Multi-Tank Addiction, my friend. So many awesome people in here. And again, a thank you and congratulations to you all that got that 1-year membership badge. I know several of you were anxious and looking forward to that. I'm super excited because that's a celebratory thing. It's been a year with memberships. Never even planned to have them, yet it happened. And you all have been huge with your support in that. Huge thank you to everybody tonight for hanging out. IHSPS bringing up a valid point. I peroxide any sponges that came with it. Just let them dry well. Absolutely. Good idea. It's going to break down the organics in there just in case. That being said, we're going to head over to Chattanooga Ed's channel. Tonight, Ed, what are we going to be talking about?
We're going to talk about 10, what Google says the 10 easiest plants are to grow in your aquarium. We'll debate this list and see how right they are.
I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I had to use that button. I hadn't gotten an opportunity. There we go. That's what we're going to do. But I do want to say again, a huge thank you to, of course, my buddy, my pal, my co-host, Chattanooga Ed, for hanging out with us tonight. A huge thank you to everybody for being here. 91 people watching currently, 77 thumbs ups. Y'all are amazing. To all of the moderators, members, super chatters, and contributors, questioners, and commentators, and of course, you awesome people on the replay crew. I appreciate you. I love you. Thank you all for being here. Until next time, keep your fish healthy, keep yourselves healthy, but don't be afraid to catch yourself a little fish room fever. Take care, everybody.